The synopsis of the banker firm is 1954. Bennett wants to get into real estate, but he encounters racism that prevents him from being a successful real estate investor. After a chance encounter with wealthy club owner Joe Morris, he convinced Joe to be his co-investor. Together, they convinced Matt Steiner, a white man, to pose as the front of the company in meetings to facilitate the sales. Eventually, they become extremely successful in Los Angeles real estate, with the two teaching Matt the basics of real estate investing. The three of them secure a number of properties in Los Angeles and effectively integrate a number of previously segregated neighborhoods by selling and renting to black families. After this success, Bennett set his sights on the local banks in his Texas hometown to give loans to the black residents. It is because the racist bank practices had excluded black people from receiving loans for small businesses and home ownership. At first, Joe protests the idea of the Bennett, but eventually he relents and the three of them move to the Texas. Firstly, when they arrive at the Texas, Matt buys the bank fronting for Bennett and Joe, but the local townspeople are extremely suspicious of this move. A bank executive tracks the records of the loans and discovers that they're giving loans to black people. He then follows Matt and discovers that his partners are black. He then threatens them with exposure which would cause a run on the bank. Then, Matt persuades Joe and Bennett to purchase a second bank and put him in charge of it despite his inexperience. After that, the racist bank executive calls in a federal investigator who checks the record of Matt's bank and discovers numerous infractions attributed to Matt's carelessness. After that, Matt, Bennett and Joe get arrested for violating federal banking laws. He then facing a 50-year prison term, and Matt takes a plea deal falsely testifying that he was stabbed by Bennett and Joe. The next day, Bennett testifies passionately about black people being given the same opportunity for upward mobility as whites. He and Joe are convicted and serve in prison. Upon release from the prison, they go with Bennett's wife Eunice to live in the Bahamas in two homes which Matt had purchased for them with the money which Bennett had entrusted to him for that purpose the night before Bennett's testimony. In scene 1, we can see that Matt Steiner is persuading or convincing a banker to sell his bank to him. The method that have been used by Matt in this movie is in the theory of communication is through eye contact and body gesture. So, the critical incidents, which is the positive one, is the way how Matt acknowledged his target and how prepared he is in convincing the banker, even though he at first was zero about banking and housing system, which is he doesn't know how to calculate the calculation of the banking. So in this way, it attracts the bankers to deal with Matt through his style and how he presents an enviable balance of the banking number system, so that the bankers who initially do not want to lower the price by 10% began to agree to the offer and became impressive toward his practically spoke about the calculation of the banking method. Also, it shows that how fast the banker assistant calculate the calculation that Matt calculate by himself. He doesn't use any calculation at all. In second scene, the federal audit is checking the report on how much loan that have been approved by Matt, which is he is the owner of the second bank in Texas, where the first one is Mainland Bank. So the critical incidents in this scene is the negative one, where he started to show his color in banking system, where he actually have zero knowledge in banking. Before this, he only practiced the knowledge that have been taught by Joe and Bennett. We can see that when the federal auditor started to question him on the bank terms, he just saying something that show no worries on the loan that exceed than amount the bank supposed to approve, which is the bank supposed to approve about $20,000 per year something. He also lack of term in loan system, where he did not put any term and conditions to his customer papers that make him finally realize what is wrong with the audit report. We also can see that he start to show his nervousness, where he wake up from where he sick and started to ask help from Bernard and Joe.
My name is Mahzatul Akmal, and I will continue our video critics for scene number 3 and 4. Scene number 3, I choose the positive portrait in communication, which is professionalism. In the scene, we can see at the end of the scene, of the cut scene, Mr. Bernard Garrett politely thanked Mr. Patrick Barker for his time, even though he failed to win Mr. Barker's heart with his idea in dealing to buy buildings. This shows that professionalism is important for our image, no matter in what kind of situation that we are in at that moment. Fourth scene, I choose the negative portrait in communication, which is a facial expression. In the scene, in the fourth scene, the secretary and Mr. Reed, which is the banker at the bank, shows a negative portrait or a negative image to their customers, especially to Mr. Garrett. Mr. Garrett came for the second time at the bank to make a deal with Mr. Reed and to make a loan for his buildings, to buy buildings. He came at the bank and he told the secretary at that time that he wanted to meet Mr. Reed. The secretary told Mr. Garrett that Mr. Reed does not want to meet any person at that day, but Mr. Garrett insists to meet Mr. Reed. The secretary made a facial expression, a negative facial expression, when Mr. Garrett insists to meet Mr. Reed at that time. But then the secretary told him that she will try to talk with Mr. Reed and try to nego whether he wanted to meet Mr. Garrett or not. But at that time, when the secretary told Mr. Reed that Mr. Garrett wanted to meet him, Mr. Reed also made a facial expression that betrays he doesn't want to make any deal with Mr. Garrett. So at that time, Mr. Garrett feels sad, and he knows that his existence at that time is not accepted at the bank. He determined to build or to make a bank for the black people, especially the black people's convenience, because at that time the bank, which is the white people's own the bank, does not want to make any deal with black people. So Mr. Garrett determined to make a bank, to build a bank for the convenience of the people, especially for the black people's group. Shows that facial expression plays a main thing, a big role when we are communicating with people, especially with our customers, because facial expression shows what we feel at that day, at that time, and it will be the image of, if we have business, it will be the image of our business when dealing with the customer. So the conclusion that I get by analyzing this movie is, one of them is have a determination when you want to do something good for yourself or other people convenience, which is portrayed by Mr. Garrett, which he determined to make to build a system or facilities for the convenience of the black people, especially since in this movie the white people do not want to make any business relationship with them. So Mr. Garrett faced a lot of racism when he wanted to do his job or to deal with other people, especially white people. The determination in himself make a good thing, which he proved that black people also can achieve the success the same as the white people. Our movie critiques on The Bankers, and that's all from our group. Hope you liked it, and thank you.